The night was warm in Epirus, but her skin was cold. A young princess stood beneath the torchlight, surrounded by men she once trusted. Her uncle approached not with kindness, but with control. What happened next would ensure her place in a throne, and in history's nightmares. This is the story of Olympias, mother of Alexander the Great, but this is not about his victories. This is about her secrets, her betrayals, and the violence that shaped her reign from her own bloodline. Before she became queen, before she gave birth to a conqueror, Olympias was a pawn. Unlike so many royal women, her power came through pain. Make no mistake, this story is not legend. It's real, and it's darker than any myth. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe to Historian Bunker, and comment where you're watching from, because this is the part of history they'd rather you never uncover. Olympias was born in Epirus, a land of wolves and kings. Her lineage was ancient, her name descended from gods. But bloodlines meant little when survival depended on obedience. She was just a girl when her father, King Arrybas, died. His death sparked a shift in power, one that would leave Olympias exposed to the ambitions of men around her. With her father gone, the throne passed to Argead, her uncle. A man respected in battle, but feared behind closed doors. He was cunning, ruthless, and had no patience for disobedience. Olympias became both a symbol and the solution. To solidify his rule and extend his power, Arrybas needed her first as a political tool, and then as something else. The sources are veiled. They speak of training, of grooming, of ensuring loyalty, but the meaning behind those phrases is impossible to miss. Something vile occurred. It is said that Olympias was violated by her own uncle, not out of lust, but out of calculation. By taking her, Arrybas ensured she could never rebel. This act, if true, was not isolated cruelty. It was strategy, a method to destroy resistance before it could form. Her silence was his victory. The trauma was buried beneath ceremony. Olympias was then offered in marriage to the King of Macedon, Philip II, a union arranged by men who spoke of alliances while ignoring her voice. The marriage was celebrated with festivals and feasts. But Olympias carried something invisible into Philip's palace: rage. Philip II saw her as exotic. Epirus was wild, and so was she. But he underestimated the depth of her experience and the steel forged by betrayal. Olympias entered Macedon not as a bride, but as a survivor. Her smile was a mask, her ambition, quiet but immense. She had learned early that no man would protect her. So she would protect herself with daggers, with prophecy, and eventually, with blood. At Philip's side, she bore a son, a boy who would later become a god in the eyes of men. But Olympias didn't raise a god, she raised a weapon. And through that child, she would reclaim everything taken from her. But first, she had to survive a court that hated powerful women. Macedon was no safer than Epirus. Here, the knives were sharper and cloaked in politics. Olympias learned quickly. She watched, she remembered, and she never forgave. She would become queen, but not by luck, not by marriage, by strategy, and by a fierce knowledge of what men are truly capable of. What her uncle had done did not break her, it sharpened her. It lit a fire that would burn every enemy who dared stand in her way. Because Olympias knew something the others didn't: monsters are only dangerous when you don't become one yourself. In Macedon, Olympias learned to hide her fury beneath layers of silk and ritual. She was now queen to Philip II, but that title meant little in a kingdom ruled by war and male pride. Philip respected her lineage at first. Her Epirot blood added weight to his throne. But as his conquests grew, his need for her diminished. And Olympias was not a woman to be dismissed. She had survived the silent brutality of Epirus. Macedon's intrigues were familiar, even predictable. Her palace was filled with enemies. Philip took other wives, dozens, some royal, some mere concubines. but only one bore him a child like Alexander. Olympias raised her son with purpose. He was not merely her heir, he was her vengeance. She filled his head with tales of gods and greatness. Some say she told him he was the son of Zeus. Others say she whispered that Philip was unworthy of him. The truth lies in the power she gave him to believe, and believe he did. From an early age, Alexander showed fire, quick wit, unmatched ambition, and a terrifying charm. Just like his mother, Olympias was not a nurturing figure in the traditional sense. She was intense, calculating, devoted to her son, but also aware of what he represented. He was her redemption, her legacy, the one man who would never turn against her. Or so she hoped, but the court saw through her ambition. She was accused of meddling in affairs beyond her station. She met these accusations with icy silence and strategic elimination. Enemies of Olympias often died strangely: poisoned wine, missing advisors, unexpected falls. There were never witnesses, only rumors. Some claimed she used snakes in her rituals, that she practiced the dark arts of Dionysus, that she worshipped foreign gods and called down death with her prayers. Whether or not those stories were true didn't matter. They gave her power. Fear became her armor. Mystery, her shield. When Philip prepared to marry a new, younger bride, Cleopatra, Eurydice, Olympias did not cry. She left the palace, and she waited. At the wedding, Philip was assassinated, killed by one of his own bodyguards. Officially, it was personal revenge, but the timing, too perfect. Olympias returned to court with her son at her side. Alexander, just 20, was now king. And behind him stood his mother, unshaken, unapologetic, unmatched. She quickly arranged the deaths of rivals. Cleopatra, Eurydice, and her child were among the first. Olympias reportedly had the infant torn from its mother's arms and executed. Cold, yes, ruthless, absolutely, but to Olympias, this was survival. Power had to be secured with blood, or it would be taken by blood. She had seen what happened to women who played nice. Her entire life was a warning against mercy, and she wasn't about to forget it. Now, she ruled as queen, mother, advisor, priestess, manipulator. And though Alexander marched across the known world, Olympias made sure Macedon obeyed her voice. The pain she once endured in Epirus had become fuel. Her uncle's betrayal had not destroyed her, it had forged her into something far more dangerous. And for the first time, she felt untouchable. But in truth, the next betrayal was already in motion. And it would begin the moment her son died. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, the world shattered. His empire stretched from Greece to India, but left behind no clear heir. And Olympias, she knew exactly what that meant. Without her son, her protection was gone. His generals, those loyal only to conquest, now circled like wolves. Each one wanted a piece of the empire. But Olympias had prepared for this. She had survived worse. And now, she had something none of the others did: a claim to blood. She supported her infant grandson, Alexander IV, son of Alexander the Great and Roxana. A baby couldn't rule, but Olympias could rule for him. She aligned with loyal factions, leveraged her name, and began executing rivals one by one. Her return to power was swift and merciless. She had one primary enemy: Cassander, son of a former Macedonian regent. He was cunning, ambitious, and saw Olympias as the last real obstacle. Olympias, ever strategic, allied with Polyperchon, another of Alexander's generals. With his help, she regained the regency of Macedon. Her enemies fled, but her vengeance was only beginning. Once back in power, she exacted brutal revenge on those who had betrayed her family after Alexander's death. She ordered the execution of Philip III, Argead, Alexander's half-brother, and his wife Eurydice. It wasn't quick, it wasn't clean, it was theatrical. Eurydice was reportedly forced to commit suicide, offered a sword, rope, and poison Untold to choose. Olympias watched it happen. Bodies lined the roads. Supporters of Cassander were hunted down. Olympias made no effort to hide her ruthlessness. She wanted them to fear her. This was not the same young girl from Epirus. That girl had been silenced. This woman was war itself. A queen made of fire, memory, and wrath, but revenge always creates enemies. And soon, Cassander returned with an army. Olympias, once feared, now stood with few allies. Her forces crumbled. Cities that once welcomed her now locked their gates. She fled, hoping for mercy. There would be none. Cassander captured her, and though she demanded a trial as a queen and mother of Alexander, he refused. Instead, he handed her to the families of those she had executed. And they showed no mercy either. Olympias, once feared queen mother, now stood alone. No soldiers, no allies, no crown, only the ghosts of her vengeance and the families she had wronged. Cassander offered them something no royal executioner had dared: justice without interference. He gave them Olympias's life, and they took it with bloodied hands. She was dragged into the open, stoned, not by strangers, but by Macedonian noble women whose husbands she had executed. Each rock thrown was personal. No guards intervened. No official recorded her final words. Her death was not honored. It was orchestrated to erase her, slowly and publicly. Thus ended the life of the mother of Alexander the Great, not in a tomb of gold, but beneath a hail of rocks from those she once ruled. And yet, Olympias's death wasn't just the end of a woman. It marked the unraveling of a dynasty built on divine arrogance and rotting bloodlines. The Argead dynasty, descended from Heracles himself, was dying from the inside. Centuries of close-kin marriage had taken their toll. Olympias had seen it firsthand. Philip III, Alexander's half-brother, suffered from cognitive challenges likely a product of inbreeding. Many successors lacked stability, even basic strategy. By the time Alexander's son, Alexander IV, was old enough to claim power, he too was eliminated, quietly murdered by Cassander to seal his claim. The royal line, once so proud, had cannibalized itself. Paranoia, violence, and genetic decline had left them vulnerable to ambitious generals and foreign invasion. Olympias had tried to hold it all together with fear, with vengeance, with iron will. But she was one woman, and the machine she fought against was ancient. In the end, Macedon fell into the hands of Cassander and his allies. The Argead bloodline, once divine, was now dust, but the legacy of Olympias did not vanish. Her name echoed through history, often feared, often misunderstood. Some called her monstrous, others misunderstood. What cannot be debated is her power, her resilience, and the undeniable influence she had on one of history's most famous men. She raised a conqueror. She protected a lineage. She carved her own legend out of a world that tried to control her from the moment she was born. The same blood that had violated her, she used to fuel her rise, and the same court that mocked her was eventually brought to its knees by her will. Her death may have ended her reign, but her shadow lingered over Macedon long after her bones were buried. History remembers Olympias through a cracked lens. To some, she was the monstrous mother, vengeful, manipulative, possibly mad. To others, she was a woman forged in betrayal who refused to break. Modern debates rage across platforms like X, formerly Twitter. Was she a villain, a victim, both? Or was she simply a woman who played the same brutal game as the men around her, only better? Her story defies easy answers. She was allegedly abused by her own uncle, manipulated into marriage, and used as a political pawn. Yet she wielded power with devastating precision. She may have been one of the first historical figures to weaponize grief. Her pain wasn't buried, it became strategy. Her rage wasn't hidden, it was calculated. Even her enemies feared her long after her death. Her name remained a warning. Never underestimate a woman raised by betrayal. Her life shines a harsh light on how ancient dynasties treated women. Not as leaders, but as currency. Olympias flipped the board. She didn't ask for a throne, she took it, and she made sure her son didn't just inherit a crown, he inherited the fire it was forged in. Alexander was her greatest achievement, her sharpest weapon. But even he couldn't protect her from the world that had shaped them both. When he died, the knives turned back toward her. She died not as a queen, but as a threat. Her story reminds us that power is never given, it's stolen, defended, and, eventually, paid for. Olympias paid with everything. And yet, her legend lives, in shadows, in whispers. In the pages of historians who still argue over her every move, she remains one of the most controversial women in ancient history. Not because of what she did, but because she dared to do what men did, unapologetically. So remember Olympias, not as a mother, not as a victim, but as a survivor who weaponized silence, grief, and rage into something unforgettable. Thank you for watching Historian Bunker. If this story challenged what you thought you knew about ancient queens, like the video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. And tell us below, was Olympias a villain, or a woman who simply learned how to survive in a man's world? History isn't always about heroes. Sometimes it's about the ones who were never allowed to be.